Good evening. Thank you for being here this evening. I'm Polly White. I'm the incoming chair for ChamberRVA. And I wanted to welcome everybody this evening and thank everybody for coming, especially our candidates. We're very excited to have you here this evening. I think this is going to be a wonderful, wonderful opportunity for us to hear all of the different views for our local candidates and really get to hear what they have to say. As a local small business person, I will tell you, I learned years ago that my business is much more affected and the lives of my employees are much more affected by our local and our state governments than anything the federal government can do to us. So with that, I want to welcome everybody again and say thank you. And I'm looking forward to hearing all the discussion.
Good evening. I'm John Easter. I'm the Vice President of Government and Community Affairs here at ChamberRVA. My role today is to quickly kind of go over the rules so everybody has them. We are taping this and streaming it live through Zoom, but we'll also be making that available on our website and making it available to the candidates after the forum. One thing we would ask is that you hold applause, not be applauding for individual answers. You want to applaud at the beginning when Bob introduces the candidates, and at the end, that's great. But in between, we'd ask you not to make any comments or hold any applause that you might have. So here's the basic format that we have. Each side is going to do 2 minutes of opening, and then when we get to the questions, the exact same question is going to be asked of both candidates. Each candidate will have 90 seconds to answer that question, and then the other person will have a chance to answer too. This is really set up as a forum, not as a debate. Our moderator will ask the questions in alternating order, so the same candidate doesn't always go first. He may, in his discretion, ask what we call a lightning round, where instead of the 90 seconds, he asks a series of questions that he's really looking for very short answers, 1 or 2 sentence answers. So please respect that. If we're going to do the lightning round, make sure you limit your answer to 2 sentences. On the regular questions, we do have a timer in the front row here. It's a timer emeritus. It's actually the president of the chamber, my boss, is doing the work of serving as timer tonight. He'll hold up a sign, green sign for 30 seconds to go, and a sign for the red for stop. And when you get the stop sign, finish your sentence. That's the end of your time. We appreciate your complying with it that way. I want to say that the questions and the topics have not been given to the candidates ahead of time. I made some suggestions to Bob Holsworth, our moderator, about possible topics. But Bob is the one who's coming up finally with the questions and choosing which ones he thinks appropriate. And some of them may be questions that he's asking that I haven't necessarily given ideas for. Lastly, once we're done all the questions, we'll have a 2-minute closing statement. We're going to, for this first forum, spend about 40 minutes essentially for that forum, and then we'll move on to the others. I think that's my job. I have covered the rules. My next job is to introduce Bob Holsworth, our moderator. I would really enjoy embarrassing Bob and going on for 5 minutes and seeing how long it took him to jump over here and cut me off, because I know he would, but I'm not going to do that. I think most of you know, absolutely one of the most knowledgeable and best well-respected political analysts in the state of Virginia. He's been doing this for many years, has lots of perspective. And so with no further ado, let me introduce Bob Holsworth. Thank you for doing it, Bob. Right business. We have Delegate Dawn Adams with us tonight, and Mark Early Jr. I've had the pleasure of knowing Mark Early Sr. for quite some time. Actually, even lived in my neighborhood now, I think, so on that front. But there was a coin toss, and what we have is that we have opening statements. According to the coin toss, Delegate Dawn Adams is going to go first for opening statements. She's going to go first for closing statements. And then she's going to get the first question when I get questions as well. So Delegate Adams, welcome. And it's your floor for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you to the Chamber for hosting this event and for my opponent for coming here tonight, as well as all the guests. My name is Dawn Adams. I'm a nurse practitioner. I'm a small business owner, a former educator, and also an author. I was first elected in 2017, and at that time I felt called to run because I felt like I needed to offer what assistance I could as a clinician, as well as somebody who had developed programs, statewide programs for the developmental and disabled. I have been a resident of the 68th district since I purchased my home 25 years ago. The pandemic showed us very clear weaknesses in our systems that have added to the collective worry and concerns for our future. As a clinician, I recognize this. And as a member of bipartisan commission on health, chair of subcommittees for aging in place and health professions, I've seen up close the policy issues and the work that needs to be done. There are big issues that we must tackle, and I believe these include potentially creating a robust state-based health insurance plan so that nobody can depend on their employer for insurance. Secondly, we need to create an infrastructure for aging in place to support the doubling of the population over 65. And lastly, we need to ensure that we have and create better community-based systems for mental health because we are in a crisis with both our children and adults. As a systems thinker, I also value and focus on innovation in public education, the environment, and fiscal responsibility. I believe as a healthcare expert, I can continue to be very adept in helping us devise a policy that's important to Virginians, and that's why I run for re-election in 2021.
Thank you. Mr. Early, 2 minutes.
Good evening. Thank you all for being here, and thank you to the Chamber for hosting us. Thank you, Delegate Adams. Appreciate the opportunity to have a conversation. My name is Mark Early. I'm a lifelong Virginian. I was born down in Chesapeake, came up this way when I was 12, lived in Midlothian, product of Chesterfield Public Schools, met my wife who is here tonight at Virginia Tech. And then after working a few years in the McDonald administration on prisoner reentry issues, I went back to law school at the University of Virginia and have been practicing law ever since. Mainly what I focus on in the legal world is criminal defense work. And my wife and I have also been foster parents the last couple of years in the city of Richmond. And I tell you that because being involved in the world of criminal defense, as well as wrapped up in the foster care system, you get a real sense of the everyday on the ground struggles that folks are going through. And you're oftentimes not meeting folks on their best day. In fact, a lot of times you're meeting them on their worst day. And you see the things that really affect folks and the way policy ends up interacting with regular life. You see lack of a good education, you see lack of stable housing, mental health issues, addiction issues, and then sometimes when you throw a handful of bad decisions in there, you're in a really tough spot. So I tell you that because if you send me to the General Assembly, these are the kind of issues and these are the kind of people that I'm going to have in my mind when we're thinking about issues. And we've had a really hard year, I think everybody has, last 2 years. Enduring the pandemic, enduring the school shutdowns, which were brutal on so many working families and kids. There's a crime spike we got going on. We have a 20-year high in murder rate, and so many people have lost their jobs and small businesses are suffering. So we got complex problems, but I want to help offer concrete solutions so we can keep our schools open, keep our standards high, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. First question goes to Delegate Adams. The Republican candidate for governor, Glenn Youngkin, has a tax plan that includes at least these 3 elements. A, eliminating the grocery tax. B, rebating part of the budget surplus to individuals and families. And C, rescinding the power of local governments to adjust property tax revenues upwards unless approved in a public referendum. Could you let us know your reasons for supporting or opposing each of Youngkin's tax proposals?
Thank you for the question. 90 seconds isn't long to answer such a complicated question, but I do want to start out and say that our tax structure is designed as a whole, and so when you're really looking at taxes piecemeal like this, it affects the whole. Take for instance the grocery tax. The average person spends about $4,000 to $5,000 a year on groceries. the tax rate is 2.5. So roughly you're talking about putting $125 in people's pockets at the end of the year. Alternatively, you're really taking $550 million out of state revenue, which means you're not funding something very important or many things that are very important to Virginians. I think if we're going to decrease the grocery tax, we need to do that as part of an overhaul of the tax system. So if that's really believed, I think it needs to be done that way. I think the other piece that you mentioned was,
Rebates and local property
so
tax.
that's, it's difficult to actually do some of that rebating because a lot of this money is already spent. And it's not really possible to do that. So again, if we want to relook at the tax structure, we should do that in totality. It's very important that we understand that state government's role is to take revenue in and to spend it on the programs and savings that it's designed to do that. Our job is to allocate scarce resources. And so we really have to do that in a whole fashion, a holistic fashion, and not piecemeal. I think that's incredibly important.
Mr. Early, 90 seconds.
I absolutely support getting rid of the grocery tax. I look forward to working with Glenn Youngkin to do it and putting it on his desk. It's a regressive old tax we should have gotten rid of a long time ago. It hurts families and working families with kids the hardest. Kids can eat a lot, I know. And this is a tax we got to get rid of. And look, we have a surplus right now. And no matter how little it is or how much it is, I'm walking around doors every day and talking to people and they're feeling pinched, right? They're feeling pinched at the gas station, at the grocery store, all over the place. So every little bit helps. And this is just one part of what I'm calling my For the Kids agenda. We're not going to have time to get up to it all now, but I want to make sure every child in Virginia has a stable home, a full stomach, and a strong education. And part of that full stomach is getting rid of the grocery tax because that will help families feed their kids. And I also want to put forth a plan for every school in Virginia to create a plan to get any sort of excess or what would be wasted food that would go to the dumpster into local food banks and shelters. So stable homes on that. Being a foster parent myself, I want to make sure we reform and improve the foster care system. I want to work to end the aging out crisis that we have. I want to give more support to kinship families and biological families so more kids can stay near home. And on the strong education point, I'm sure we'll get to that. On the specific question of rebating, yeah, I think we need to figure out a way to get it done.
Question now goes to Mr. Early. In response to the blackface incident, Governor Northam said he wanted to make racial equity a focus for the remainder of his administration. He took several steps legislatively and administratively to address racial inequities in the criminal justice system, educational curriculum, healthcare, and business practices. Do you support the steps that Governor Northam has taken to address racial inequity? And what do you believe that a crucial step should be made to make progress on racial inequality in our district here?
Yeah, that's a great question, and that's also tough for a 90-second, but it would depend on the particular policy you're talking about. But absolutely, that's a huge topic that we're focusing on. I'll tell you, let me just tell you two things because there's too much to talk about in that whole question. But let me tell you two things. So one thing that probably makes me a minority in my party that I was glad to see happen, and partially because of the racial inequities, is I'm glad we got rid of the death penalty. I think that was something that had to get done, it needed to get done, and was long past due because the modern way it's instituted and handled, it was not helpful, and we did have racial disparities there, so I'm glad we did that. Look, it's no secret that over the last several years, really last 2 years, there have been a lot of videos, high-profile cases that have highlighted police and community interaction. The nation's conscience was pricked by the video of George Floyd and other videos, and rightly so. And a lot of important and necessary conversations have come from that, and those conversations need to continue. I think some of the criminal justice, I'm a criminal defense attorney myself, and some of the criminal justice reforms that were put forth do make sense. We need to make sure we do that in a smart and effective way that leads to a more just system, but also does not undercut our public safety interests. So there's a lot there that needs to continue to be worked on. I look forward to it.
Delegate Adams, 90 seconds.
Thank you. Would you mind repeating the last?
Yeah, do you support the steps that Governor Northam has taken to address racial inequity? And what do you believe are the crucial steps that need to be taken in this district to address racial inequality?
Thank you. Obviously, I do support the steps that Governor Northam has taken. I've taken many votes to that effect. I am very proud of a lot of the reform that has been made. I think it's important for the people of Virginia and people of this district to understand that even though it seemed like we did a lot, we were just right-sizing work that hadn't been done in decades. We're bringing up our policy into the 21st century and addressing disparities that have existed for a long time, completely unaddressed. Issues like the death penalty, that was a vote that I was just more than happy to vote for. It's something I've believed in my entire life, that is not a good policy. I think we made many strides around making sure that our systems are fair. One of the most important things that we do is appoint judges. And what I think we need to continue to do, and what we've done very well, is create diversity on the bench that has never existed in our district before. Chesterfield, Richmond, Henrico, all are looking at a more diverse bench, whether it be women or people of color. And I think that has been a very important decision that we've made. There is much work to be done. I think we have a number of other issues coming up, such as our cannabis policy. That was very important to the Black community, that this is equitable, and what's important, and that we consider the Black experience around marijuana. And so what the most important thing we can do there is do it right. And so that is, I'm proud to be on the Campus Oversight Committee so that we can work on that.
Next question is for Delegate Adams to start with. Both of you just in your opening comments addressed the issue of housing and affordable housing in this region and in this district. What steps do you think really need to be taken to provide secure housing for more folks and to address the eviction crisis that seems to be emerging as well?
Thank you. Yes. And housing is really fundamental to everything that relates to people's health. It is incumbent upon us to make sure that we figure this out, but we can't figure out housing at the state level. What we can do at the state level is provide funding, and we have really enhanced our housing trust fund. What I think is important for our region is that there is a master plan that includes Henrico, Chesterfield, and Richmond combined to figure out how we integrate housing and not segregate housing. I think it's a very toxic environment when you have segregated and separated homes. We had, when I moved here 27 years ago, we had one of the highest per capita rates of low-income housing on the Eastern Seaboard. We are seeing now the degradation of those homes, and I have actually personally worked in many of those homes in the courts, like Mosby Court, Gilpin Court, and I can tell you that the roaches were so bold there, they could change the channel on the TV. I mean, it was really horrible conditions that people live in, and that's because there was a lack of maintenance and concern. I think if we elevate everybody, if we integrate the community, and we figure out a system for making housing, whether it's purchasing a home or renting a home, more affordable for everyone. In Richmond in particular, we're kind of landlocked, and so a lot of what you're seeing is high rises. But I think we need to be really working together as a community in the Richmond, Chesterfield, and Henrico area.
Mr. Early, 90 seconds.
Yeah, this is an important issue. I think especially, having a lot of friends who are, buying their first home. It's a incredibly difficult market out there. And part of the reason is because there's a lack of affordable housing. That's partly due to the market. That's partly due to lack of supply. But this is a complicated issue. But I think some of the things we can do on the way to solving it is we need proper funding. We need public-private partnerships. We need incentives for folks to build that kind of housing that's necessary. And that's a part of it. Another part of it is just having a robust economy that can actually, funnel these demands. So that's important as well. And it's critical because I've also, met a lot of folks who not only are they having trouble buying their first home, but also older folks who are looking to downsize and they actually can't seem to find anything to downsize into because the supply is so low. So there's a lot that needs to be done. And I think there's a lot that the state can do with localities and working with home builders to come up with good solutions.
Next question for Mr. Early first. You mentioned in your opening comment about how since COVID, a number of people have lost their jobs. At the same time, we have employers telling us they can't find enough workers. And this is a situation that's only been exacerbated by COVID-19. What steps should the Assembly take to support the private sector in workforce development and workforce supply efforts things that are critical to the competitive nature of this region and to the Commonwealth?
Yeah, it's a great question. You know, I don't think there's a day that goes by that I don't walk into a shop or a store and they either have some sort of sign up that says they can't serve their customers because they can't find anybody to work, or they don't have what they need. I was in a donut shop the other day and they said, sorry, we don't have any donuts because we can't find anybody to work, which is a travesty, obviously. So this is a real issue. You know, part of it is just about creating the climate to where businesses want to be here and want to thrive. You know, Virginia was recently ranked one of near the very bottom in terms of best states to start a new business in. And I don't think there's any reason that we need to be at the bottom of that list. I think with good tax policy, with low regulations, without dumping more and more red tape on these small businesses, we can have more job opportunities. But we also need to incentivize, you know, there's dignity in work and we got to get people back to work, right? And this is a complicated problem, but there's a lot of things we can do to incentivize people to get back to work. But the core issue is making sure we have a thriving economy to where wages rise, employment rises, and inflation goes down. It's all a part of a bigger picture, and I look forward to working on it.
Delegate Adams, thank you, sir.
Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate the question. You know, we have been through an extraordinary time, and I don't think anybody anticipated having to go through a pandemic in their lifetime. It created a big shift in our workforce that was already hurting. Part of what we did do in the last couple of years is, in fact, the last year was create the G3 program, which really seeks to address the workforce shortage. The workforce shortage has been there. It's just been exacerbated by the pandemic. So what the G3 program does is it targets low and middle income kids and tries to give them the educational support to go into these fields such as healthcare and information technology, special education, and a whole host of like labor. The other thing we did was create an avenue for apprenticeships through PLAs, basically, so that people that wanted to go into a skilled trade could do that through their apprenticeship. So I think as a nurse who has been through 4 universities, part of that tuition burden is real to me in my experience. What I was able to do is work full time, go to school, and have what was UVA at the time pay for that education. As long as I kept my grades up, I was reimbursed. I think we need to be looking at solutions like that so that people can find career paths that speak to them. And I think it helps for employers to be able to have an employee that's going to work for them after they've gone to school and they've built that relationship. And I think that's one path to helping this workforce solution, but there are many, many things that we need to do.
Thank you very much. Delegate Adams, I'm going to start now with what John Easter called the lightning round. I'm just going to take you through a series of questions. If you can get yes or no, that's great, or a sentence or 2 maximum. Would you support legislation to prevent individuals from possessing assault-style weapons?
I think I would, except it qualified. I think collectors should be able to have that. There are specialty collectors, and I think that with the right paperwork, that's fine. I don't see the need to have assault-style weapons broadly.
Would you support any legislation to weaken or eliminate Virginia's right to work law?
I spent a lot of time reading this. I think that people would want to have this conversation if they knew the origin of right to work. So I think we should open the conversation. People should not be compelled to join the labor union, but they should not benefit from a labor union's negotiation if they're not participating.
Would you support retaining a chief diversity officer as a gubernatorial cabinet appointment?
I do support that. I think that's a good idea. I think you can only really understand what's going on if you have the right people in the room.
Do you support Governor Northam's decision to take down the Robert E. Lee Monument?
I do support that decision. Again, if you look at the origin story behind some of these monuments, and it's incumbent upon us to move forward. And I think we can do much better things with that space.
Will you vote yes or no on the casino referendum? That's why I asked whether you lived in Richmond.
I will absolutely be voting no.
Would you support ending qualified immunity for police officers?
I do not support any qualified immunity. We need to protect our officers. We also need to make sure that we're protecting the civil rights of our citizens, but I think we need to preserve that.
Okay. Mr. Early, going to take you through the same set.
Sure.
Would you support any legislation to prevent individuals from possessing assault-style weapons?
No, I wouldn't. I think there's much better target areas to focus on when it comes to gun violence, particularly the day-to-day gun violence we see. Almost every day we wake up and see an article of a shooting. We got to get smart policing strategies to get that down.
Would you support any legislation to weaken or eliminate Virginia's right to work law?
No, unequivocally, no. I think it's critical to our competitiveness. I think getting rid of it would be a death knell to our competitiveness compared to our sister states. I think unions are great and serve a very important societal purpose, but I don't want to force anybody into this.
Would you support retaining a chief diversity officer as a gubernatorial cabinet appointment?
I'd be open to it.
Do you support Governor Northam's decision to take the Robert E. Lee Monument down?
I think, because of our checkered past and difficult history, I think, frankly, I get the arguments on both sides. I think the most important thing is, number one, that these decisions are made within the rule of law, that they're made not by people going out and tearing down things in the middle of the night, but by people making lawful decisions. And now that it's down, I think we need to have a collaborative conversation about what Monument Avenue is going to look like for the future.
Will you vote yes or no on the casino referendum?
I'm in Chesterfield, but if I was here, I would vote no. I think casinos overpromise, they underdeliver. For every $1 revenue we're going to take in, we're going to end up spending $3 for social services, preys on vulnerable communities. And I wish the General Assembly, including Delegate Adams, had not voted to allow these referendums in the first place.
Would you support ending qualified immunity for police officers?
No, absolutely not. I think it's critical. We already have a retention and hiring problem with our officers. There are right ways to do this and wrong ways to improve our policing situation. We need to do more funding, not defunding. We need to keep qualified immunity, and we need to do more training, not less training.
Thanks. Okay, now, Mr. Early, next question to you. We're back to the 90 seconds. The Supreme Court's hearing a case this term, which the state of Mississippi is requesting that Roe v. Wade be overturned. The Supreme Court agrees with Mississippi. Would you support incorporating Roe v. Wade in the Constitution? In addition, what, if any, changes would you support to Virginia's current abortion laws?
So let me start by acknowledging the difficulty and sensitivity of this topic. It's not easy for anybody, and it's a fundamental issue that I think goes to the heart of who we are. So I'm pro-life, always have been, not going to run from that. I am who I am. Let me tell you, there's a lot to argue about on this issue, but let me tell you something that I know for sure. In the last couple of years, we've had 4 foster kids come through our house. Every single one of them came from a difficult situation. What I know for sure is that the world is a better place because each of them is here. That's what I know for sure. So what I am interested in on this issue, if I'm in the legislature, is working to find common ground, because I think there's more common ground than people let on. I think we need to support and help women in need. I think we need to keep men accountable so more men stay around. And I think we need a culture and a commonwealth that's welcoming to life, including after birth, whether that's improving our foster care system, having a strong education system, getting the training we need so that everybody can have a productive life. I think we need to work on creating a culture that welcomes them.
Delegate Adams, 90 seconds.
Well, I appreciate the question. I have actually never believed that government legislators should be practicing medicine, and my record reflects that. I believe in the sovereign right of people to have their privacy, and that includes also having an abortion. That's what I believe in. I feel like we made the right decision to reverse the onerous and intrusive components of our abortion law. I think it's important that medical providers are able to do what they think is right for their patients. It is perplexing to me to think how whether a man stays in a woman's life relates to this topic. It is really, really important that we have safe and protected healthcare for all people. Reproductive care is important to all people, and it's important to families. Many women who do have an abortion are wives and mothers in families. So this is a difficult issue for people. We need to make sure it's available and safe. And I think we need to protect that if the Constitution decides that, or the Supreme Court decides to overturn Roe v. Wade. We need to do something to protect women in Virginia. My mother grew up as a nurse as well. She lived through the time when many women were dying. Just even in the last 48 hours, I heard reports of a 12-year-old not knowing what to do because she's pregnant and why does she have to keep the baby? Women are already talking about throwing themselves down the stairs. It is ridiculous in the 21st century that we cannot have healthcare for every person in the way that they see fit with their doctor or provider.
Thank you. Next question for you, Delegate Adams. This year, the Virginia General Assembly legalized marijuana and would start retail sales in 2024. Would you, A, support any steps to revoke legalization or the retail sale of marijuana? And B, support allowing individuals currently serving jail or prison terms for marijuana violations to be resentenced?
Thank you for that question. It's an issue that's very important. I think there is a great deal of misinformation about cannabis. I grew up in the 70s and 80s. The misinformation started in the 60s. Cannabis actually is much safer than alcohol. So I don't think people understand that. I think we need to educate people more. But we also need to find a path that we can make the policies around legalized cannabis comprehensive, equitable, and address the public safety concerns that people have. That's a completely important and reasonable topic. I personally feel like we have a lot of work to do in the Cannabis Oversight Committee and the other subcommittees that relate to how we're going to implement cannabis in terms of sales and dispensary availability. We do have a model like with the ABC stores where we limit that, but we need to determine exactly what our tax rate is, how the businesses will be chosen, what we will do with those funds. Reparations I think are an important part of that mix for people who are basically charged for strictly marijuana possession. I think if people have charges or in jails strictly again for marijuana possession or use, I think we should look at sentencing them or even letting them go.
Thanks. Mr. Early, two parts of the question. Do you support any steps to revoke legalization or the retail sale, or do you support individuals currently serving jail terms or prison terms to be resentenced for marijuana violations? 90 seconds, please.
So in my practice, as a criminal defense attorney, I handled, unfortunately, a lot of marijuana cases, probably the most common thing that comes across the courtroom. I think it does not make sense to be sending people to jail for simple possession of marijuana. I always supported the decriminalization of it, and I was glad to see that step happen. And I absolutely, of course, also support any sort of reasonable medical usage of it. I think I'm skeptical of the overall legalization scheme, but to be honest with you, I think the cat's out of the bag on it. The legislature has already acted and put it forward. But I will tell you, the legislation that was passed was extremely rushed, and it's a mess, frankly. If you go out and talk to people, people are extremely confused about what's legal and what's not legal. I just saw an article in the paper the other day about somebody being arrested and convicted for something who, they didn't even realize what they were doing, because the thing is so confusing that you really can't execute it well. And a virtue, what should be a virtue of the law, is clarity. That's critical to it. So I think there's a lot of work to be done on this, no matter which route we take. I'm not trying to put the cat back in the bag on this, but I think we need to do it in a way, if it's going to go forward, it needs to be in a way that's fair, that doesn't just give huge benefits to giant corporations to be able to take it over. It needs to be done fairly. And absolutely, the public safety concerns need to be taken into account. And we need to learn from other states who have taken this route and, adjust accordingly, because they all haven't had a great experience. But
Resentencing, 10 seconds on that.
I think I agree. To be honest with you, I don't know, in my practice, for people that are just in jail for possession, I don't think there are there anymore. But if they were just for that, then yes.
Thanks. Okay, Mr. Early, next question. A CBS News poll out this morning indicates that 70% of Virginia Republicans do not believe that Virginia votes were counted fairly and accurately in the 2020 presidential election. Do you believe that the votes of Virginians were counted fairly and accurately? And do you have any serious concerns about the fundamental integrity of Virginia's election procedures?
Yeah, it's a simple answer. And the question behind the question, I think the 2020 election was legitimate. Joe Biden's the president. And I think there's sort of two, well, let me put it this way. The principles here are very clear, right? It should be very easy to vote because it's a fundamental right. And it should also be very hard to cheat, right? It's pretty simple. And what's really, really critical, both to the stability of the Commonwealth and the stability of the country, is that we have a clear, transparent, easy to understand election system, because we cannot, after every single election, have half the people doubt the outcome. That is a recipe for instability. Now, there's two mistakes you can make on this. One mistake is recklessly and wrongfully casting doubt when there's not merit to do so, right? There is another mistake on the other side, and that's a mistake of stripping away any sort of basic protections that also undermine people's confidence, right? Those are both mistakes, and we need to avoid both of those. So, the vast majority of people across every demographic support the basic thing of voter ID. Pretty sure I heard Stacey Abrams on news the other day, even recanting and saying she supports voter ID. It's a basic measure. I think we should have that. But no, I think while we need common sense, in our elections, but again, transparency is key because confidence is key.
Delegate Adams?
Thank you for the question.
Yeah, do you believe that both Virginians were counted fairly and accurately in the 2020 presidential election? And do you have serious concerns about the fundamental integrity of Virginia's election procedures?
Thank you. I think that, in fact, the vote was a fair election. Our voting, we do an audit. We had a report that came out in March that demonstrated that it was a fair election, that our security for our voting is there. I find it frustrating and bewildering, this sort of passive conversation around we need to have it available, but also secure. It is secure, and it's been demonstrated secure in the outcome of the 2020 election is legitimate. I feel like we were leaders in the South for passing voting rights legislation that was important to give optimal access to our fundamental right to vote. I was proud to vote for the Voting Rights Act. I think that's a preventative measure that really aims to make sure we don't disenfranchise any voters. I think the no excuse voting is very important. I think expanding the times available when people can't get off work the one day a year. I think we made some good decisions about how to make sure that every citizen has a right to vote that wants to vote. So I think that's my.
Okay, our final question before we do closing statements. And this goes to Delegate Adams first. Do you support vaccine mandates for teachers and healthcare workers who interact with patients?
Thank you for that question. This vaccine situation and the mask, it's very frustrating to me as a healthcare provider that we're in the situation that from the federal government on down, people have politicized masks and vaccines. We know that masks are a barrier that help prevent the spread of COVID. We know in schools that it helps 3 times because if people are wearing masks. It is wrong to me that we've gotten to a place in society where we don't care about each other enough to do this voluntarily. So I don't like the idea of mandates ever. But I think until our kids are vaccinated and they have the opportunity to be safe, people have the right to work. We are an at-will state. So if you want to stay employed and your employer wants to have vaccine mandates, they should be allowed to do that. And you have the choice to stay or not stay. But it is unfortunate that we've gotten to this situation to begin with, because the truth of the matter is much misinformation was provided. The vaccine itself may be new, but the technology behind the vaccine is not new. It's decades old. And there is plenty of evidence to show, not by Dr. Google, but by double-blind studies that have been peer-reviewed and confirmed that these are safe vaccines. So yes, the vaccine is new. The science isn't new. The idea of mandates is not new. But at the end of the day, the employer should get to decide, and you get to decide if you want to stay there.
Mr. Early, vaccine mandates for teachers and healthcare workers who interact with patients.
Yeah, I think it's important to first acknowledge how difficult the last couple of years have been for everybody when it comes to COVID. A lot of people have lost loved ones. A lot of people have lost jobs. A lot of people have lost income. It's just been a difficult year, not to mention the social isolation, not only of our kids, but even of so many of us. It's been really hard. Let me start by saying I'm extremely pro-vaccine. I think it's essentially a modern miracle that we got a vaccine as fast as we did, and I'm thankful for that. And of course, while nothing's perfect, it's incredibly helpful, and it's by far the best tool we've seen in combating this. Early on in the pandemic, I volunteered for one of these vaccine trials and got stuck in the arm with something I didn't even know what it was at the time, because I thought it was a small step I could take to try to get us heading in the right direction on this. So again, I'm extremely thankful for the vaccines, and I'd encourage everybody who, if you haven't gotten vaccinated, seriously consider it if you haven't done it yet. That said, I'm generally not a fan of mandates. I think persuasion and encouragement is almost always a better tool than threat and force. And I don't want to, after how difficult the last couple of years have been, I don't want to start seeing mass layoffs or mass firings of teachers, cops, firefighters, pilots. I think that's only going to exacerbate our problems. I actually also think it's going to be counterproductive, because if people are hesitant, I think that's going to harden them in their hesitancy. So I think mandates are a bad idea. And I think luckily in Virginia, we have a pretty high vaccination rate. And I think we need to continue on that track.
Okay, so our closing statements now, we'll begin with Delegate Adams.
Well, and thank you again, Bob, and to the chamber, to my opponent, and also to our guests for having us here and for your patience and listening to us. I do want to reiterate, and I know there is not much of a focus on this in this forum, that we have big issues in front of us, particularly as it relates to healthcare infrastructure and infrastructure that supports us through our lifespan. We must be able to secure affordable health insurance. We must find a path so that we can age in place, which we have no structure for. And we have to be able to access mental health supports if we're going to live our best life. I personally want people to know that I am an experienced and pragmatic legislator who has really strong relationships across the aisles. Every one of the bills that I've passed has had bipartisan support. I have probably knocked tens of thousands of doors in the last 4.5 years. And the issues that remain top of mind for constituents are healthcare and the access of healthcare that's affordable, public education, the environment, and stopping or staging the climate crisis as much as we can, and a robust economy. People have said they want a thoughtful and hardworking person to represent them, that get things done that make their lives better. I work every day to do just that. And I understand that nothing eats up our bread and butter like the cost of healthcare. I am a small business owner. I'm a leader in the legislature on multiple health-based committees. And I believe I've been the delegate that the 68th district needs. I hope people see fit to send me back as the only clinician practicing medicine in the House. I think that's an important lens, especially as we navigate the path forward post-COVID.
Mr. Early, 2 minutes.
Well, thank you all. It's been an honor to be here. Thank you again to the chamber, and thank you to Delegate Adams. I think it's been a substantive conversation. I appreciate the opportunity. So since this campaign started back early this year, my full-time job has been walking around neighborhoods and knocking on doors and talking to folks. And as I've been doing that, I hear the same thing at doors almost every single day. People are concerned about their kids and their schools, especially after the school shutdowns. People are concerned about their small businesses and getting folks back to work and the pinching effect of inflation on their life. People are concerned about safety in their community and rising crime. And then they're also concerned about everything they're seeing from the federal government as well. We have this disaster in Afghanistan. We have a $3.5 trillion bill on the table. We have sky-high inflation. We got a humanitarian crisis at the border. People feel like things are coming apart at the seams and they're worried about it. So, but I've become convinced talking to those people that this year in Virginia, up and down the ballot, is really not about partisanship. It's not about left versus right, Republican versus Democrat. I think it's about common sense ideas, common sense solutions, and common sense values to real problems. A lot of these things we're facing are complex, but what we need is concrete solutions. It would be a huge honor to represent the 68th District in the House of Delegates. If the people see fit to send me there, I'm going to make sure we keep our schools open, keep our academic standards high, keep politics out of the classroom, make sure parents are involved. Let me say that again, make sure parents are involved in their kids' education, make sure our streets are safe, and make sure we get folks back to work. Those are my focuses. It would be an honor to serve you. Thank you again for being here tonight.
Okay, thank you. Please thank everyone.
Thank you.
We're going to